So, for this NewsBlast, I will be talking about the Second Vatican Council. Now, I know some people, when they hear the word council, especially in history of Christianity terms, they think about the early church like Nicaea, Constantinople, Ephesus, Chalcedon, all of those ecumenical councils. However, the Second Vatican Council, which I am talking about today, convened in the 1960s, so it's not as far away as some may think. Now, this came about, opened in October of 1962 with Pope John the 23rd. This came about in Pope John saw the need to bring the Catholic Church together and focus on the church as a whole. Of course, they debated doctrine. They talked about the previous councils. Some of the previous councils include the First Vatican Council, the Council of Trent, but they also focused on some new doctrine as well and just some new rulings within the church. And so one of the main goals of the Second Vatican Council was not doctrine alone, but also the practicality of the church and how they would use doctrine within the church. And so out of this, they focused on what does the church do? What is one of the main goals of the church? And that came down to the worship services, which includes the scripture reading, the liturgies, the prayers, the preaching, all of that. And so they noticed that a lot of the time in their preaching, in their biblical readings, they saw a focus on the New Testament and specific passages of the New Testament. And so part of the Second Vatican Council was to expand into the Old Testament, into other parts of the New Testament that were seemingly untouched. Another huge part of this is the liturgy and prayers. To be specific, one of the heated debates of the Second Vatican Council was the language used in liturgy and prayers. Up until this point, the main language used in the Catholic Church was Latin. The problem arose when the discussion became, where is the use of the vernacular language in church services? If you're unaware, vernacular just means the culture, the native language. And so that may be a different language, whether that's a tribal language or just Swahili, French, just different languages. So in our book, Philip Jenkins mentions two specific examples, one being from Ghana and another being New Zealand. And in that, obviously when we're reading the book, it's in English, but we see not only is the language, the specific lettering, what's at hand, but more the cultural experiences and how different cultures can interweave the gospel and interweave church doctrine into their worship services and into their practices. And so this was a heated debate, although in the end, the council agreed that the use of the vernacular was beneficial and should be used in worship services. And so we see this take off, and we see a growth of evangelism, a growth of discipleship, and a growth of faith as people they took the faith as their own, as they saw their way of life and their culture intersect with their faith and their reality of God. But yeah, that's that.